What's going on, guys? Welcome to the BBQ Late Night Live. I'm your host, Andrew, aka the Grill Sergeant, coming in from Los Angeles, California. I have my co-host with the most, Jared from Frack Daddy Barbecue. What up, Jared?
What is up, brother? You got
And
two Texans in the house.
Yeah, I'm outnumbered for now, but Lord knows that hopefully by summer I'm going to be in Texas there with you. But right now we have a very awesome and special guest, Arnie Tex, in the house tonight. So the honor is all mine. Before we get started, though, I do want to do a channel shout out to Brian from Castle Hives. Thank you for being an awesome supporter. And speaking of, this is no relationship, but this beer says "Let's be homies." So it's a honey hazy IPA. I'm telling you, I love craft beer. And so Jared, you hooked us up on tonight's live. Jared texted me and he's like, "Hey, I got a guest for our live show." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Who do you got?" He's like, "Arnie Tex." I was like, "What? Are you? Like how much?"
So you knew who I was?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. I watch your videos and it's I don't know. It's kind of funny. There's some channels where it's either really good video, but they can't communicate it well. And then there's some channels that they can communicate it well, but the editing and all that stuff is horrible. Yeah. And you come in with a package of just like both. It's relatable. And it's kind of like, hey, if I'm a backyard, barbecue, which I am, I don't do competitions or anything like that. I aspire to one day. I'd love to try it. And so so when I saw you on YouTube, I think the first time I saw you was a Facebook ad. So I think your kids were actually throwing out Facebook ads for your online competition courses and stuff like that. And so that's where I had first saw you. And then when I saw you on YouTube, I was like, oh, hey, that's the guy. So, and then here we are tonight. So I feel the honor is all ours.
Thanks for having us, man, or having me. I appreciate it very much. I feel honored to be on y'all's show also. So I appreciate it very much.
That is
very welcome, man.
Very, very cool. So yeah, we have almost 30 people up in here. Thank you guys for showing up and showing the love. So tonight, basically what we're going to do is if you guys have any questions, if you want to put them at Frack Daddy Barbecue, he will basically kind of write those down and keep track of that. And so then pretty much at the end of the segment, if you guys have any questions for Arnie Tex, you can basically put them down there. But I figure let's dive in. So Arnie, tell us about yourself. Where did you grow up? Where are you from? Kind of give us your backstory.
Okay. Basically, I was born in Phoenix, Arizona, but I got to Texas as quick as I could. So my parents had moved up there with some friends of theirs that were from South Texas as well. And the guy had landed some kind of big job. And so they were friends. And when you baptize a baby or whatever in your Catholic, in Spanish, we call them compadres, right? Everybody's kind of familiar with that term. So they were compadres. And so they invited my parents to go to Arizona. And so my dad moved over there and was an encyclopedia salesman and a bartender and I don't know what else. And so they didn't stay there more than a couple of years. And then my dad's brother lived in West Texas. He was a foreman of a big farm ranch operation. And so he talked my dad into coming back to work for him. And so that's how I got to Texas. And so I basically grew up in West Texas in Pecos, between Pecos and Balmorhea, which is home of, I think, the country's largest natural swimming pool right by the Fort Davis Mountains. And so beautiful country at the time, and grew up on a farm and ranch place. There were 7,000 acres. My uncle had passed away, shortly after we got there. And so my dad wound up getting the foreman job. So he was foreman over that whole operation. They had cattle and, sorghum and cotton and watermelon and melons and just, all kinds of stuff. And so my dad liked to barbecue and party, and since he was like the foreman, our house was kind of like the hangout place. The farm was 35 miles from the nearest town, which was Pecos. So people that worked and lived out in the country, that's what you do on the weekend, you hang out, right?
Yeah.
Ain't nothing in Pecos. We know that, Arnie.
Huh?
I said there's nothing in Pecos. We both know that.
Not no more, other than a bunch of tore up roads, from all the oil field people.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. We went back there I don't know, 4 or 5 years back, I guess. And I mean, I was like, holy cow, man! It doesn't look nothing like I remember. But yeah, that's where I grew up. And so my dad used to throw big parties, once a month, or every once in a while. And those parties consisted of like killing a whole cow and cutting it all up and cooking it over the next 2 or 3 days.
Nice.
Sometimes it was pig, sometimes it was goat, and sometimes both. And so I grew up around that environment,
Yeah.
old school Mexicanos, just drinking and partying, for two
Yeah.
or 3 days at a time. That was like the culture, right?
Yeah.
And then Monday they'd all go to work. I don't know how much sleep they got over the weekend, but
Yeah.
they'd all go to work on Monday morning. And so I kind of grew up around fire and cooking animals and stuff like that. And when you're little, you don't really think a whole lot about it or give it much thought, and even growing up, my dad would cook. Once we moved back to the valley here in South Texas, we moved back here in '77, I believe it was. And
Hey, Andrew, connect
Yeah,
me
you-
to my other computer.
Yeah, I'll switch you right now. All right.
and so basically, we moved back to the Rio Grande Valley in about '77, and my parents bought a couple acres out here in Edinburgh. And it was not as much partying, but every once in a while they'd get together and get the whole family, because all our family's from here. And our place was out in the country, so it was the hangout once again, where all the family would go and hang out, and some people would stay overnight. And and it just wasn't all the time, but that's what I remember. Our place was where our family would gather
Yeah.
and cook and get together and barbecue or make tamales or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And so I kind of grew up around that. That I guess, and then I got married and realized I didn't know how to barbecue, right? I had one of my uncles gave me. He was a hobby welder. He worked at a meat market. He was a butcher, and he would build little barbecue pits on weekends to sell them. And so he gave us one as a wedding present.
Oh,
And
how funny.
I still have the lid to it hanging in my patio. And it was a little bitty, pit, and I learned how to cook fajitas on that first. That was the thing in fajitas here in South Texas.
Yeah.
And then I started cooking chicken and stuff like that. And so that was my entry into cooking barbecue, and
Nice.
that's how I got started.
Nice. Didn't you just post a fajitas video?
Excuse me. Actually, yeah, I think I have 3 of them in there.
Oh,
4
nice.
now with that latest one. That one was
Yeah.
on the hot plate or the griddle. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I think we have 4 of them on there now.
That's awesome.
And we pretty much just try to record stuff that we like and that we actually do and eat. And we just, because that's what I know how to do.
Yeah.
I don't like look through the internet and try to come up with these amazing creative ideas or whatever. I'm just like, well, I know how to do this. Let's record it, right?
Yeah.
And, so far, it's been great. It's been
Yeah.
great. Our channel has grown a lot. We've been on there, I think, since 2017, but we really didn't take it real serious till about 6 months ago. And we just decided, my wife and I do barbecue full time. We were competitors for about 8 years full time, and until she got that breast cancer. And so then we started the online class, and that went pretty well. And then we decided to do the rubs, and so that has taken off really better than we expected. And so we kind of have those little gears all working at the same time.
Yeah.
And my kids used to live down here too a couple years back, and we started this little deal together. The whole Arnie Tex thing was my older son's college project, and for some project he had, and that's how it started.
Oh, wow.
And, we did it just for fun, and then people started to ask questions, and so we started to cook a little and post pictures, and it really wasn't a lot of video stuff. It was more pictures. And so it just kind of grew from there, organically. We weren't really like going out to make a page or be barbecue gurus or nothing like that. I was in the car business most of my life, and I was a manager for a 3-car independent used car dealership. It was one of the biggest ones in South Texas. And, and before that, I was a salesman at a bigger dealership, at a new car store. And so I worked there, I don't know, 10, 12 years, I think. And I had 12 salesmen under me. And all a bunch of good, fun-loving guys. You know, I mean, we like to barbecue, we like to hunt, and we like to fish, and have a good time. And
Yeah.
so we literally barbecued 6 days a week at work. Because if it wasn't me, it was one of the other guys.
Yeah.
And then on Sundays, I would cook 10, 12, 15, 20 briskets, and sell them whole to people that wanted me to cook briskets for them. And
Wow.
so that was kind of like my week was barbecue 7 days a week.
Yeah.
And a funny story. One day, my wife and I went. I mean, we've always eaten a little bit of everything, right? But
Yeah.
one day we're sitting in Olive Garden, and I ordered some spaghetti, and I was like, "Damn, that's some good spaghetti, man." There's actually good food besides barbecue, eh? I was like, I eat barbecue 24/7, man. I need to eat some other stuff besides just meat.
That's
And my
hilarious.
sister, my older sister, she would tell me sometimes, "You eat too much meat." She has like 3 degrees, right? I mean, she's a
Yeah.
PhD, whatever. I was like, be quiet. And then as I got a little bit older, I started to see that people actually really, that was a thing, right? So I
Yeah.
started to research it a little bit. I was like, okay, I need to back off the meat. And actually, I started getting joint pains, and when I backed off the red meat, I got better.
Yeah.
That's how it was. It was just like too much red meat, I guess. I don't have gout or whatever that is, right?
Yeah.
But I do remember I was having a little issue getting out of bed sometimes. I was in my early 40s, I think, about that time, maybe. Uh, and so, because of the little bit of that research I had done on colon cancer, I learned a little bit about gout because one of the guys that works for us had that. And so I was like, all right, I need to find balance, right?
Yeah.
Everything in life has to be balanced. And so that's kind of how I backed it down a little bit. And then we got into competition barbecue while I was working there. And I was fortunate that the owner and I got along really, really well. And he was a really nice and generous guy to me. And he would let me take 1 weekend a month off, and I'd go cook somewhere. And so the catering and sales became less and less over time because we were on the competition trail more. We bought a little motorhome,
Yeah.
and then a toy hauler after we sold that. And then one day, when you cook a lot, people are always like, "Oh, your food's so great. You should open a restaurant. You should open a restaurant. Your food's amazing. Everybody tells you that when you cook a
Yeah.
lot." And so in 2008, I believe it was, 2008, April, um, my wife had a brother-in-law that owned a little Mexican restaurant in a town nearby, and he was going to close it down. So we offered to just buy it from him, and and he said, okay. We settled on a price. We basically bought a turnkey business. And if you think back, you remember what happened in May of 2009? Everything crashed, right? The banking scenario, whatever that was called.
Yeah.
Crash. So we still did pretty good all of '08. But once Lent started in '09, for some reason, man, I mean, literally, I thought somebody had roadblocked the street because, we went from being okay busy, not busy like we were in '08, but we're still kind of getting along okay,
Yeah.
to like, hey, where's everybody at? We got all this food and nobody's in the restaurant, and I'm going out looking like, is the road closed or what the heck? Literally, it was like one day to the next.
Yeah.
You're like, what the heck? So, okay, I know it's Lent, but we went. We had all our regular customers. Where'd they go? But the area we were in had a lot of taquerias, and there was a lot of new restaurants that opened up. I think there was 18 of them in that year, besides mine, that had opened up. And and they were all like on this. It was the strip, right? The main street. We were all on that same strip, and so I realized everybody took a little bit of my pie, a little bit of pie, a little bit of the pie, and we didn't have seafood at the time. And so I said, okay, we need seafood. So we started cooking seafood, and it picked up a little bit. And I figured when Lent's over, we'll be back to normal. Everything's fine. But it never did come back to normal. It stayed on a steady but not good enough to stay in business trajectory. And so in July of '09, we decided to sell the place, and we sold it and came out okay. We lost a bunch of money overall, but as far as what we paid for the business and sold it for, we came out actually ahead. So we came out all right. And you know. And so then I was like, okay, I don't want to be a car dealer anymore, man. They're 80-hour weeks, and you know, you don't really have a life. Even though with the man I worked for, I did.
Yeah.
But still, I wanted to do something else and not be in the car business anymore, just from the sheer hour perspective.
Yeah.
Even though the pay is fantastic. And so I kind of just didn't know what I was going to do. And I got a job as a rep for an auto auction, and did that for a couple of years and just kind of did okay. And during that interim, a friend of mine, I had stopped cooking when my kids got to be teenagers, and they didn't want to go to the cook-offs anymore. And that was when I had sold the motorhome, and we bought a toy hauler, and I bought them some dirt bikes, and we did the dirt bike thing for 6 years, I think, more or less, and until they both went to college. And so then my wife and I decided we would cook again a little bit. One of my friends, a good friend of mine, came up to me one day and said, "Hey, man, I'll build a big badass barbecue trailer. Me and you will cook together." And he knew I had a pretty good track record, you know, previous to that, cooking as well. And he's like, "If we make any money, we'll split it." And I said, "All right, let's do it," you know. So we actually that first year and didn't do too well. Things changed during that 6-year interim, right?
Yeah.
And, as you know, stuff changes all the time in the cooking world. And so he decided, like, you know what? You keep the trailer as long as you want. He goes, use it all you want. He goes, I'm out. He goes, you know, we're spending money, not getting a return. And so we did that. He said, go ahead and do it. And so I used that big trailer around here locally and stuff. And it was just a monster. It was 42-inch pipe by 7 feet wide was the cooking chamber, plus the firebox. And then on the back of that trailer, we had the same 42-inch grill by 7 feet wide, you know, on the back side of the trailer.
Wow.
So it took a friggin' truckload of wood to run that puppy, you know, on a typical weekend. It was really more geared toward catering and parties and things like that.
Yeah.
And after a few events, I just realized, like, this is too much work, man. And it was such a big, heavy steel trailer that it wasn't feasible to haul it down the road, you know, out of town. And so I told my buddy, let's sell it, get rid of it, you know, and get you your money back. And he said, yeah, just sell it for whatever. He goes, keep whatever you want, give me whatever you want. So I wound up selling it for him. I gave him all the money, and it was his. And so I started cooking in my little backyard pits, and I realized it was just so much easier to manage the fire on 3 little pits. You know, I had a little 16-inch offset, a little aluminum Weber lookalike grill that my dad found on the side of the road. I don't know where, you know, but it was like an old, cool aluminum Weber looking deal.
Yeah.
And then I had a little upright box that they sold at Home Depot for $100. I got it for free, you know, and they have 3 racks like that, little square box. And a friend of mine gave it to me, right? Just literally, hey, I don't want this thing. You want it? Yeah, I'll take it, you know. And so I would cook ribs on that, chicken on the little Weber deal, and the brisket on the little 16-inch offset. And, man, we just started to do good, man, you know. I did do a lot of internet research on flavors and recipes.
Yeah.
You know, flavor combinations of rubs and sauces and, you know, stuff like that. And I just kind of came up with some stuff and a brine that worked really good on the chicken. And I was making a barbecue rub for brisket at home that wasn't entirely mine. I got it from another guy that used to be a competitor that was on one of the barbecue forums at the time before Facebook and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And so I kind of took his and kind of made it a little bit more Texas flavor wise. And I still use that today. I've tweaked it since, but I still run it today. It's a really good brisket rub.
Actually, I have a question for you right there. When you're saying you took something and then you made it Texas wise, what does that mean? Is there something like, is it just adding more salt and pepper? Like, what makes something a little bit more Texas?
Pretty much, yes. Outside, if you look at a lot of your cookbooks and a lot of your rubs that are not from Texas, if you go back 5 years and back, many of them didn't have any salt at all. There's a lot of sugar, a lot of, you know, chili powder and paprika and other savory ingredients, but not really much salt, not really much pepper. And Texas is all about salt and pepper.
Yeah.
And seasonal. Here we're seasonal, especially in South Texas. We like everything salty, man. And so yeah, that's what I mean. I added more salt and pepper and a little bit of garlic, a little more garlic, and a little bit of onion from what he had, and I forget what else it was. It was one other ingredient I can't remember, but so yeah, I just tweaked it and kind of made it my own. It also has chili pepper and paprika and mustard and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I made it a little more peppery and salty, a la
Okay.
Texas style.
Hey
And
Arnie, there's a question for you from RJ Garza. It says, "Is it better to be a limited pitmaster than a franchise, one store versus backyard? And if you go back, would you change?"
trying to understand that question.
Right.
Is it sounds like if he opens his single store, his own
Yeah.
shop? You know, I'm gonna try to answer it if I understand the question correctly. I did the restaurant we bought was a Mexican food, and there's a few things I learned the hard way there. Mexican food and barbecue do not necessarily go well together. It's a different clientele. Um, the other thing I learned is when you start out, it's amazing. It's a wonderful experience, especially if you like to cook and you're a people person, which I am, and you get. I mean, I'd get up at 3 in the morning and go to work whistling, just really happy, and I'd be lighting fires and having a great time for about 6 months. Um, and we didn't open; we would actually close at 3 every day. There was no dinner, and but after 6 months of that, every Saturday, every Sunday, I quit riding dirt bikes with my buddies because I had a business to run, and so there was kind of like no fun on the 7 day work week. And so, looking back now, I understand why a lot of these restaurants that open up and food trailers don't do it 7 days a week. They start on either Wednesday or Thursday, some of them Tuesday, and they take a couple of days off. Man, you really need that refresher, that recuperation time. You really do when you own a restaurant. Now, is it better to be a sole proprietor with your own business? Given what I just said, it's always better to be your own boss. Yes, because you get to make your own decisions. You get to um, take the success and pat yourself on the back, but you also have to be responsible and make those decisions that sometimes are not easy to make. You have to hire, you have to fire, you have to make sure the books are in order, you have to make sure everything gets bought and that it's consistent and that people ain't stealing from you, and and make sure that they clean and make sure that they do everything that the normal restaurant's supposed to do. So you have to manage and juggle a lot of different things, including the permits and the food health department and the city baloney stuff, all the things that go with that. If you're a good multitasker, you can probably do it, but honestly, it takes a little bit of teamwork. A lot of people, and my banker told me, he goes, Arnie, you're nuts. He goes, you're successful in the car business. You make some good money. You're making good money. He goes, did you know that restaurants are the number one failure business in the country, and especially in Texas? I said, no, but I'll be okay, and, and I honestly think we probably would have been okay if that whole bank crash thing hadn't happened. I think things might have been different, but we don't know. I mean, looking back, we still don't know. But it's a lot of hard work, and so I equate that now to sort of like being a bar owner. It has to be a lifestyle.
Yeah.
You go to bed at 2 in the morning if you own a bar, and you sleep half a day, and then you start the next day. It's a different kind of life. It's a passion. It's something you do because you love it. But a lot of times, when it becomes a job, you don't love it so much more.
Yeah.
Not that you don't enjoy the cooking part and the serving people part. It's all of this other stuff that goes with that, which is running the business and managing employees, and egos and personalities and bookwork. It's way better to hire an accountant or a CPA or whoever. Let them do what they do best instead of you trying to sit there on your day off trying to get it all figured out. And that's basically what I did after the first few months. I'm like, I can't do this stuff, man. And so luckily we had a customer that had a CPA shop just down the street from us, and he was one of our customers when I bought the place. And so I was able to make friends with him, and we just gave him all that business, and he took care of that. And he still does today. And it's been like, I don't know, 18 years now or more. And he's still my CPA. And so, yeah, it's a hard job. Whereas if you work for a franchise, you're a manager or pitmaster or whatever.
Yeah.
You clock in, you clock out, you get a nice paycheck, you're done. You do your job and everybody does theirs.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That the downside of that is you work for somebody else. They tell you when to go and when to come and when you can be off and when you can't. And if somebody don't show up, guess what? You're doing double shifts,
Yeah.
and that's just the way it is. So
Mm.
it's everything comes with some pros and cons. It's all good depending on you. Some people can juggle, manage, multitask, and run a business, and some people can't. And I saw that a lot in the car business. In the car business, sometimes we would have a super stud salesman that could just run circles around all of us. He was just a phenomenal salesman. So
Yeah.
the owners naturally think, well, if this guy's a badass salesman, we'll make him a manager and he'll show everybody else how to be a badass salesman. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Some guys can manage and maybe not even be very good salespeople, but they're great managers.
Yeah.
And some guys can be really great salespeople, but are sorry managers. And
Yeah.
some can do both, and I feel, honestly, not bragging, but I feel fortunate that I was one of those that was pretty good at both.
Yeah.
And we were very good. We were the most successful used car independent franchise in South Texas after I started there. And just, honestly, it manage people and talk to them right and treat them right, and then sometimes you have to make those hard decisions. But generally, you want to be a good team leader and keep people on your side and motivate them and inspire them and do all that sort of stuff. And the restaurant's no different. I found that out in the restaurant, but it was much, much more challenging in the restaurant business.
Right.
It really was, just because the wait staff and the tips, that becomes a whole different little monster that everybody's fighting about and stealing tables from each other and picking up tips when they're not looking, and just all those little things. I was very fortunate that I had a couple of really good cooks. And basically my kitchen staff, you hear all these horror stories about people stealing out the back in the trash, whatever. I honestly don't think I ever had that problem at my restaurant. I was very, very fortunate in that department. The front part with all the girls and the staff, the wait staff, that was a different deal, And I had a pretty good crew, but it just, it was a nightmare sometimes, managing, some
Yeah.
and finding good wait staff,
Yeah.
Down here, because of our proximity to the border, there are a lot of restaurants, a lot of taquerias, a lot of Mexican Tex-Mex restaurants, a lot of good restaurants, high-end stuff, a lot of franchise stuff. It's just wall-to-wall restaurants down here. So most of the people that work in that industry have plenty of places to go.
Yeah.
And we called it, in the car business and in the restaurant business, the revolving door.
Yeah.
Bob would run over to that restaurant, and the guy that got fired or quit there comes over to this restaurant, and it was just a constant little circle. Some would go here, some would go there, and they do this whole, the tour, I would call it. It was the same in the car business, and so yeah, and it was very challenging to keep people in the restaurant business, much more challenging than the car business.
So in transitioning, so like when, what prompted you to want to enter your first competition, and when was that?
Good question. I started working for Expression Motors, I believe it was 96. Yeah. And, like I said, me and the owner just got along really, really good. And I loved to cook and barbecue. And so I was always cooking at home. And so I brought one of my pits and would cook there at work for the guys and the employees in the back and stuff. And so then I decided I would build barbecue pits in my spare time when I wasn't doing catering stuff. And so my dad was a welder and a fabricator, so I knew how to do that too, right?
Yeah.
And when we moved to the valley, he wasn't a farmer no more. He was a welder fabricator, had his own business. And so I knew how to do that, and I figured out it's too much damn work. So I started to go to Uvalde and Smithville and Houston, buying different brands of offset stick burners and grills and selling them on the car lot. And the owner gave me a spot in the front and let me put my barbecue pits there. And so because of that, we were always cooking. Like I said, all of a sudden, it just like we were always cooking. And then just one day I was on vacation, and I've told the story before. We were on vacation, my wife and I, in Austin, and we passed by this place called Barbecue Galore. and I had never heard of it. I mean, I'd never seen a barbecue store or nothing like
Yeah.
that. So we made a U. We went back in there, bought a bunch of stuff. I had never seen a charcoal chimney in my life. I
Oh, you're
bought
like,
my
what is that thing?
charcoal
Yeah.
barbecues galore. That was probably '98, and so on the way out, there was a barbecue news magazine on the counter, and the cashier gave it to me. She goes, "Hey, these are free. Take it with you." So we went to the hotel, and I read the whole thing that night. And at the back, they had all these contests. And I told my wife, "Hey, look, there's a bunch of nut jobs like me. They actually have contests for people that like to cook, right?"
Oh, that's funny.
And I said, "We should check one of these out one of these days." Excuse me. And a few months later, we had this. There was a cook-off in Magnolia, Texas, just north of Houston. And so we decided we were going to go to that one. So I put in for the weekend off, and it just happened that it rained that week all week long. I mean, the whole state was covered in water. It wasn't just us. The
Yeah.
whole state. It was just a weird week. And so, well, this was my weekend out. We drove up there, cook off or not, and we're going to take our little trip we planned, right?
Yeah.
And I had a 4-wheel drive Suburban with some little bit bigger tires on it at the time. And when we got off the freeway in Magnolia, I mean, the water was up to the door on the side roads, on the feeders. And I was like, holy cow, what are we going to do? And there was no hotels had vacancies. We were driving all over till about 1 a.m, trying to find a place to sleep. We finally found one. Got up in the morning, it had stopped raining, and we went to the location. It was called Bobby's on the Bayou. And I mean, it was just mud everywhere. But there was a bunch of motorhomes and barbecue pits and stuff. And so I walked up to where they had the bar, and I asked, "Are you guys still having a cook-off?" And the lady goes, she was the I still remember to this day. Her name's Sandy Babcock, super sweet lady. She's like, "Son, we don't stop no cook-off for a little bit of rain. Of course we're having a cook-off." I was, "All right, cool. We're gonna hang out with y'all." And she goes, "Do you want to be a judge?" And I was like, "Sure, I'll taste some barbecue." And so they told us when to come back. We went, walked around, met a bunch of really cool people.
Yeah.
At that time, Johnny Triggs was not a superstar. We met him there. We met Jan and Don Canterbury, who also became really, really badass cooks here in Texas. Ronnie Wade. Ronnie Wade is probably the winningest cook in the history of Texas barbecue, maybe in the country now, next to Myron Mixon. I mean, that guy won everything just for 20 years, man. And he's just a phenomenal cook. And he's pretty much retired from cooking now, but he was an awesome cook. Anyway, that's how we got introduced into competition barbecue.
Yeah.
We got to judge, my wife and I, and so my wife and I are sitting next to each other, and we would taste, and she'd look at me, and I'd look at her, and she'd be like, "You could do this. Your food's just as good as theirs." And that's very typical of every backyarder, that shows up, or that sees or knows about cook-offs. Mine is as good as anybody else. That's just what they think, right?
Yeah.
So we thought the same thing, and so we came home, and my brother worked for us at the car dealership too, and so my dad had an old trash trailer, we had a '56 Ford Chevy front end, those straight axles, and I asked him, and I said, "Dad, I want to buy that trailer from you because you haven't used it in years." He goes, "Just take it," and I said, "No, man, I want to buy it." He goes, "Just take it." I said, "No, because you're gonna ask back for it later." I said, "Here's $100. I bought it. It's mine."
Nice.
And so I bought it from him, and I tore it all apart, and we modified the trailer and added to it a little bit. My brother and I, there at the shop at work, and then I put propane tank on it and added a fire bar. We built it. It took us about 6 months, just their time, and it was about a 6-pack every other night. We'd work on it a couple of times a week, and finally got it done. Went back to Houston to a cook-off, and did really well. We walked in all 3 categories, so we were hooked. We were hooked, and after that, it was just like, okay, when's the next one? And at that time, there was not a lot of cook-offs really in Texas at all. They were all in the Houston area, Grand Prairie area, and a couple in the Temple, Austin area, and that was pretty much it. I called it the little triangle, Houston, DFW, Austin. They were pretty much in that area. Palestine was another place too. And so we went to a couple of cook-offs, slept in the trucks, set up a little canopy and that sort of stuff. Did okay. We still walked and did good. We couldn't quite win anything for a couple of years, but we kept going. And then we decided we'd buy a little motorhome. So we bought a little 30-foot Pace Arrow. I got a good deal from a friend that worked at an RV place, and we bought that and started cooking it a little bit more free. We do about 10 a year for the next year or two. And then, like I said, at some point, I just had been reading and researching stuff. And I was fortunate because I had all these guys at work that liked to barbecue too. And so I'd go buy stuff and make recipes and we'd cook at work. And I'd tell everybody, give me a score, man. Write it on a piece of paper and tell me what you think, And so I would adjust and tweak from there.
Yeah.
And so we went back and we did good. And then all of a sudden we won one and then another. And it just kind of took off from there for a while.
Right.
And like I said, my kid didn't want to go to the cook-offs anymore. By then they were teenagers.
Yeah.
And so we just really stuck to it and did a couple of local ones throughout the year, like maybe 2 or 3 tops. And when they went to college, I had been riding dirt bikes with my friends during that time too. And so we kind of quit riding dirt bikes after the restaurant fiasco. We sold that, and I quit riding dirt bikes because I didn't have health insurance. And with dirt bikes, it's like bull riding. It's not if, it's when.
Yeah.
You're gonna get hurt. Period.
Yeah.
And
Matter of time.
Uh-huh.
I said it's a matter of time when.
Yeah, it's just time, sooner or later. And so we decided to cook instead and did some local ones and did okay. And then we won our first really big money event. We made like, I don't know, $5,000 at
Oh, wow.
local event. And I was like, wow, man, that was pretty cool, right? And like a couple of weeks later, or maybe 2-3 weeks, there was another local event that paid not quite that much, but we came home with like a couple of $1,000.
Yeah.
And at that same dealer no more because I was cooking more and I didn't want to go work full time doing that. And so I became a service advisor at a local dealership, Dodge store, that I had worked at as a car salesman before I was a manager at the other place. And I took that job because I wanted weekends off.
Yeah.
And the shop was closed on weekends.
Yeah.
And so we started cooking a little bit more, won a second one, won a third one. And I told my wife, I said, you know what? This month in the last 3 cook-offs, I made more money than I make in 2 months or 3 months at the car dealership,
Wow.
So
Yeah.
we need to do this full time, So I literally walked away from my job and started cooking because nobody told me that you don't win all the time. We did a couple more, did okay, and then we had a couple that we didn't do jack. I'm like, oh crap, man. I don't have a paycheck this week, and so luckily I had a little bit of money saved and whatever. So we just kept going and going and going, and we would cater and sell briskets on the weekend, on holidays or on weekends that we didn't have cook-offs. I had a big list of friends, and people that liked my brisket, so I would just cook whole briskets. And back when it was $179 a pound, I have a cap that says make brisket $179 again. Right?
I love that hat. That's so
yeah. Yeah, and a friend of mine makes those and sells them. Anyway, so I would buy a brisket for $30-$35 and I'd sell it for $60, and I wouldn't cook unless I had at least 10, because that way it makes the whole day worth it.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how we kept cooking and going and stuff. And in 2013 we kind of hit a stride and we strung 11 grand champions together in that year out of 23 cook-offs. So it was almost a 50% win ratio, not counting the reserve brands and some of the other top 10s. And really, I had just found some flavor profiles and some injections and a brine that worked, and a couple mixed some good sauces that worked. So I kind of equated to hard work and a little bit of luck also. And so we did really good in 13 and 14 and 15, and then in 16. Some other people had been teaching classes too, and so people kept asking me, teach us a class, teach us how to grand champion barbecue and whatever.
Yeah.
But I really want to do it at the time at first because I'm like, well, I'm not going to teach you what I do because then you're going to go win too, and I still like to win. Yeah. And at some point we had already done 3-4 years of running like that, 35-40 cook-offs a year. And I told my wife, I said, man, people keep asking, and I ran the numbers. And I said, it's a pretty good pay weekend if we just do one class, we'll do one and that's it.
Yeah.
So we put it out there thinking we'd get maybe 10 or 12 people, and we wound up with 25. And I had to stop taking people because we only had so much room in the building we were going to host it in. And so there were so many people that wanted to attend the class that the very next week we had another one. And guys
Wow.
came from all over Texas and came to the class. And one guy from out of state, one guy was on vacation in Hawaii, and he cut his vacation short so he could come to the class. I just still to this day I'm like, damn, that's wild, But
Wow.
because we had such a good track record up to that point,
Yeah.
uh, and I was the first and only dummy that was giving out written recipes of everything that I did, you know, and nobody else did that. And that was one of the main attractions that made people want to attend my classes. And so a lot of people started asking me, "Hey, can you come to Laredo? Can you come to Houston? Can you come, to Lubbock? Can you come over here and come?" And so I told my wife, "Hey, we do one every couple of months or every other, a quarter. It's pretty good paycheck. Let's just do it.
Yeah.
We didn't have regular jobs like
Yeah.
normal folks anyway, so we did that. It was pretty lucrative for us for the next couple of years. Traveled all over Texas, met a lot of wonderful people, taught a lot of people how to cook, good barbecue. Some of them did really well, some didn't. Some people you can teach them everything and show them everything, and for whatever reason, they just can't seem to put it together. And there's some you just tell them a little bit, man, and they take off. It just everybody has a knack. I call it
Yeah.
a knack, like or a gift. Some people can dance, some can sing. Some of us can cook. It's just to me, maybe it's a genetic gift because my grandfather was a chef. My
Yeah.
dad used to cook all the time too. Maybe it's just something that runs in your DNA. I don't know, but
Yeah.
we all have some kind of talent that God gave us, and I guess that was mine. And so we just kind of went through that, and then we started that Arnie Tex thing. And my son, my older boy, through high school, worked for a portrait photographer, and they would also record video. That's when video started to get popular.
Yeah.
We would do weddings and quinceañeras and stuff like that. And so he learned that part of it. And when he was doing this whole thing in college, the Arnie Tex project that somehow just took off on its own. And then he just came up with this idea, that, "Hey, Dad, why don't you put an online school together?" And I said, "Well, I don't know how to do that." He said, "No, I'll help you, and we'll record it and whatever." And so we did that. Um, and, a couple of the guys, or one guy in particular, got ahead of us and had his online school first after I gave him the idea. But, I always say there's enough for everybody. There's no need to be greedy or nothing like that. We work at our own pace.
Yeah.
And when we had time, because my kids worked full time, and so we would do it on a weekend here and a weekend there, and we'd record and they'd put it together. And we finally got it all done, and we didn't actually have it done when we did the pre-launch in 2019. It wasn't quite finished, and it took us a good 8-10 months to finish the class after we did our first launch, with a promise of finishing it, and we did. And then we added a little bit more than we originally had intended to, and we're still planning to add some more stuff to it. But it took off well. I'm not going to say we made a ton of money, but it was a pretty steady, consistent stream of income for a while there. And then we started running Facebook ads, and that helped a bunch. And then last year, the way I understand it, Facebook and Apple just got into this war, about information sharing or whatever, because Facebook wants everything and Apple doesn't want to share everything or whatever. I don't understand that whole stuff, but
Yeah.
we notice our ads, were not performing as well as they had been. And so they got less and less and less. And really, we haven't run an ad probably in 6 months now. But somehow organically, we still pull a few sales every month, and it doesn't really cost us much to maintain the website. So most of what comes in is profit because it's already built and it's done. And so both me and my oldest son and the three of us, my younger son, and my older boy, the three of us split it. It's a business enterprise that we all three share because
Yeah.
I can't do it by myself. They do the whole back end and the editing. And Danny, my older boy, he runs all the IT stuff in the background. He's very, very gifted in all that stuff too. And so he takes care of all of that. In the meantime, they moved to San Antonio. And that's why it took us a long time to finish the class because my daughter-in-law was going to go get her PhD for the course that she was taking. And then for whatever reason, something happened and she wasn't able to finish that year. So they moved to Austin the next year, and then COVID hit, and So they're still up there, and she's going online now. And so it was harder to record then.
Mhm.
So I had to buy cameras and learn how to use them. So I even now that we've gotten pretty good and pretty proficient at it, um, I still spend a lot of time on camera forums and Facebook camera pages because it's another art in
Yeah.
itself that you have to learn. I mean, just like cooking.
Yeah.
Um, and the
Hey,
camera.
Arnie,
Yes, sir.
we have a couple questions for you.
Sure.
So 805
I
barbecue.
tend to rattle and ramble, so stop me anytime you want.
No, we're hearing
Remember, I'm
greatness
a
right
car
now.
salesman. I can talk, man.
That's
So
hilarious.
805 barbecue. Well, first off, Eric from Camp House Barbecue wanted me to tell you from Eric and Jordan. They tell you hi.
Hey guys, what's up, man? Thanks for
Um,
watching, man. I know those guys are cool dudes, man.
yeah, he's been pestering me. He goes, you haven't asked my question or told Arnie yet. So,
They're good
805
folks.
barbecue junkie was asking question: should I get a barbecue restaurant, or is it better just to run a mobile barbecue truck? Not sure what I want to do. He says I have 50 grand. What's your opinion? Thanks.
Okay, remember that opinions are that. They're just opinions, and everybody's different, and locations, regions are different, people are different. So a lot of it has to do with your own tolerance for certain things. Um, I think about a food trailer sometimes, and I just, man, I when I do stuff, I need space, man. I'm a messy cook, and I'm very fortunate that my wife does not like mess. She's OCD, so it works really good that she follows behind me. So where I'm going with this is, if you can work in a trailer and you're comfortable, if it's big enough. Me personally, having had a restaurant and knowing what it takes to maintain a brick and mortar building, I would personally and make sure you love the business and the hours that go with it, and learn the whole business side of the operation, because it's not just cooking. I mean, that's the fun part. That's the easy part. Running
Right.
the business, maintaining the books, finding inventory. In this day and age, it's harder to find really good, consistent quality meats than it used to be. Learn everything about the business, and make sure that this is what you really want to do, because another thing about a trailer is, if you don't like your neighbors, you can move, But once you sign a 3 or a 5 year lease, or even a 1 year lease, you're stuck to it, or else
Yeah.
you're going to lose a crap load of money if you don't make it. I think it's much more profitable to have a trailer, especially if you can find a good deal on a used one, and buy it right. 6 months later or a year later, you decide you don't want it. You can recuperate either all or most of your money back. You
Yeah.
really can't do that with a brick and mortar building that you're renting unless you buy it and own the property.
Right.
So I would recommend that. Learn the business, learn, the whole aspect of the business side of it, and then decide if it's successful and you're doing really well and you have a big following, and if you feel like you want to take that next logical step and go into a building, then do that. And I'm going to add something else to that. I did a lot of catering. We don't do it anymore, but we used to do a lot of catering. Honestly, catering is either out of a house or a little warehouse or something, is the most profitable side of barbecue, because there's never a loss. There's never overcooking. If you're going to cater for 100 people or 200 people or 50 people, you already know how much to buy, how much to cook, how much to take. You get paid in advance. If half their people don't show up, you still get paid for all of it. And
Yeah.
you go home and you're done. And go to the next job. Me personally, I never did weddings and stuff like that because I hate working on weekends. I mean, I want to go compete or ride my dirt bike or have fun, right? But weddings are very, very profitable. But man, they're hard to do. Just from some of the other catering friends that I know, they're a hard deal. And I don't know. I can't remember ever being to a wedding that was catered by a barbecue person. It's always what's that chicken with the cheese inside of it? What's that called?
Chicken cordon.
Chicken.
Yeah.
And they're $20 plates. I mean, you talk about profitable, man. That's a money making deal right there. Because
Hey,
I know from the restaurant, when we used to buy the chicken breast, they cost 50 cents, man, for a chicken breast, and you get 2 plates out of one chicken breast.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a money-making gig right there. I know it's a little more expensive now, right? But yeah, I mean, weddings are very, very profitable. But
Well,
yeah,
James,
I would recommend you start catering if you're not already doing that, and build up a little experience on plating and serving and portions and what you need, every time you go out, and organizational skills and stuff like that. And then get your trailer. And if you really like the business, dude, go get you a brick and mortar. You may have 10 buildings, before it's all said and done. You never know.
right.
Depends on your age and how much you love it and how good of a business person you are.
So, a question that I have for you personally: what would you say is the biggest mistake people make when it comes to cooking brisket?
Good question. The biggest mistake, I think, is not letting it rest long enough. In most cases, I think the general rule of thumb out there, stereotypical, if we can call it that, is an hour rest time. And really, 3-4 hours is way, way better and makes a huge difference.
Right.
In moisture, in tenderness, in overall juiciness, and the whole eating experience of the brisket. I would say that's probably the biggest mistake, assuming that you know how to cook the brisket and it turned out the way it's supposed to at the end of the cook. Other than that, I mean, I think a lot of people undercook their brisket, and don't realize that you can take them a little bit farther to get that super duper experience. And I'm gonna say this is a third one. Wrap at 165. Everybody wrap at 165, and to me that's just like, it's good. I'm not saying it's bad.
Yeah.
If you have a really nice bark and it's beautiful, okay, wrap it at 165. Very rarely does that happen at 165 though.
Yeah.
I've wrapped them at 175. I'm going to say that's about my average, 175 or 80 most of the time. I've wrapped them at 190, 195 and still had a phenomenal good brisket, because you allow that bark to form the flavor. The other dumb thing people say all the time, it doesn't take on any more smoke after. Bullshit. It takes on smoke as long as there's smoke.
I've heard that. Yeah.
It's gonna taste smokier the longer you leave it. Now, I think the misconception is the smoke ring. Yes, it's not gonna make a deeper smoke ring after 2 hours. That is true, but it does take on more smoke and more smoky flavor the longer you leave it unwrapped. And if you look at the typical restaurant, at least here in Texas, like Franklin's and all these other big names, they don't wrap in 2 hours or 3 hours. It's 12 or 14 hours before they're wrapping. So that's why they have such an amazing, smoky, flavorful brisket, because they allow their meats to take on a lot of smoke. They don't wrap in 2 hours. You know what I mean?
So James from Aim McClaimum, he says, James says rest time depends on the grade of brisket. He goes, in my opinion, which, I mean, I do agree like that. I think, the higher quality grade of brisket you have, your briskets are going to cook a lot quicker than a select or a choice.
That's something people say. Honestly, that has not been my experience. I've seen white goose cook a little quicker, and I've seen some take longer. And I don't necessarily agree with James. Not to argue. I mean, I have a lot of respect for James. He's a great cook too, and a great YouTuber. But I don't think rest time has anything to do with the grade. Just me personally. I mean, I've cooked them all, and I have not had that experience. A longer rest is always better. Typical restaurants, like Smoking Moon here in Franklin, everybody, they generally cook their briskets during the day today for tomorrow's serving, and they pull them off at 10, 11 at night. They stick them in an electric ultrasham at 150 degrees, and they rest all night till 11 the next day when they start serving them. And they cook white goose and they cook primes. Most of the time, some of them cook choice, but that's the standard routine in a restaurant, and that makes a phenomenal brisket. That rest time, that long rest time, regardless of the grade. But again, I'm not a scientist, so sorry, James. I'm not going to say you're wrong, because I honestly don't know the science behind that. You may be correct. That just has not been my personal experience.
It sounds like a video idea right there, Arnie.
Right? I'm gonna have to get with a mad scientist or what's he called?
Yeah, what's funny is as you were saying that, I was like, I wouldn't be surprised if you go to Mad Scientist Barbecue if he's like, we're gonna experiment today. I remember cooking my first brisket.
Hell, I just gave him an idea. He's gonna beat me to it, right?
No. You could take it. You could take it. You can have that one. I remember cooking my first brisket. I don't know how long briskets are. You can do all the research you want, and then you actually put it in the smoker, and you're like, there's some briskets that cook faster. There's some briskets that cook longer. Yes. And I remember getting up at 5 a.m, putting the brisket on and telling people, come over at 7 o'clock. We'll be eating good. And then, I think at 6 o'clock, it's maybe 180, 190. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, I'm not even close. So anyway, I pull it.
Cool, Andrew.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things where you're like, you just start freaking out. And I remember pulling it at 2:03. Letting it rest for 30 minutes, carving into it. And it was one of those things where it wasn't bad, but you're like, okay, it's my first brisket, and then you're harder on yourself. The people that are eating it, they're getting free.
They're loving it.
This is amazing. No, you have to understand the juice in there, this and that. Yeah. And I remember the second time I did it, I was like, all right, 1 hour rest. And then the third time I did it, 2 hour rest, or I think 4 hours, something like that. And then ever since then, it was just like, let the brisket rest, like 4 hours, 6 hours, whatever it takes. The longer you let it rest, the juicier, cut into it and just juices.
James says he's going to the store in the morning to get briskets
to do an experiment. You go. Let us know how it turns out. We'll watch it.
Yeah.
And every brisket's different.
Yeah,
they're all different. And I'm going to share two real quick stories with y'all. We were in Gonzales, Texas, cooking one year. And we were in our trailer, and I started to try to inject my brisket. And I don't know if y'all inject or not. When the needle has a burr on it, you can feel it when it goes into the meat. You can feel it tearing instead of sliding right in. Yeah. And so it felt a couple of times. I'm like, I got a bad needle, so I threw it away and got another one. Felt the same. So I get the needle and I'm touching it, and it's like, no, there's no burr. It's perfect. So I'm like, I could literally feel what it was. The meat was just hard. For whatever reason, it just was hard to get the needle into it. Mm-hmm. And I remember looking at my wife, and I'm like, oh, man, this thing ain't taking the injection. It's just squirting all over the place. So I just kept poking and then I strained the injection because it was all over inside the box, and I did it again. I swear I probably poked that brisket 80, 100 times minimum, Yeah. And I pretty much told my wife, I said, I think we're going to be out on brisket tomorrow. It's not holding enough injection.
Eric says it's an old cow.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. So I threw it in there and in the smoker in the morning, and, I was running my fire. It was a stick burner. And I come back about an hour and a half later, and I opened the lid, and that thing had blown up like a freaking football. And I was like, oh, we're going to be all right, because that means it did hold some injection more than I thought it had.
Okay, that's funny.
And long story short, we wound up with a first place brisket and grand champion that day. But same town, a year later, different cook-off, but same town. Something about that town and briskets for me. It was raining and pouring like crazy, and I went through the whole routine, same stuff. And kind of like what you said earlier, that brisket, I put it in at 6 a.m, and it was brisket turn-ins at 3. It was 2:45, and that thing was still like tough as leather, super hard. And so, I cut it, I turned it in. We didn't walk, didn't get a call.
Yeah,
it was a tough shoe leather brisket.
Yeah,
and it was a prime, Yeah. But one animal to the next, they're all different, man. They're all different.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
So, a lot of people may not know. Some people may, but recently you just competed in the San Antonio barbecue.
Yes, sir.
You wanna tell people how you did in that, or?
Yeah, we wound up with a second place steak on the Friday night categories. I cooked 2 Wagyus that I picked up at HEB. I was making fun of one of my friends because we were texting back and forth, and he's like, man, I just bought 2 Wagyu steaks. It was freaking $170, man. I was like, I picked up 2 at HEB for $80, man. So I was laughing at him, and then we wound up getting a second place call with those. And
nice.
it was phenomenal because it was my first time actually cooking steak at that particular event. We've cooked beans a couple of times and done good with those. We didn't walk on beans this year, and we did a you pick it category, and I don't know what I was thinking because that's like you pick whatever meat you want. So it's not like you're comparing steak to steak or brisket to brisket. It's like whatever. And I'm not a chefy guy, so I don't make fancy trays or whatever. So I just cooked fajitas. I thought, well, everybody likes fajitas anyway, right? So I did that, and we were scrambling. I did not go prepared, which it goes against one of my cardinal rules. You know, when you show up, it's the Boy Scout rule: be prepared, right? You know,
Yeah.
have your injections made, have your meat trimmed, have everything ready to go. And because I wanted to get there on Wednesday and not fight all the traffic and everybody on Thursday getting in there, because you get 300 people trying to get into the same place at the same time or within a few hours, it's a nut house. It's crazy. We've done it before many years. And so I just said, I'm going to get there on Wednesday night and park, and we're set. So I didn't prepare anything. I figured I'd just prepare everything. Yeah, I got all day Thursday. Somehow that didn't work out, right? And so we're cooking Friday, and I had a couple of steaks I was going to test run at home, didn't get a chance. So we actually started cooking early Saturday, doing test runs on steaks. And I tried something different that I had never done before. It was just an idea that popped into my head on the way up there. And by God's grace, it worked. The judges liked it, and we wound up with a second place steak. I heard it was 100 or 103 teams, somewhere around there in the steak category. So just to get any call at an event like that, honestly, is a huge accomplishment. Um, and one of my good friends has won the steak the last 2 years in a row there. So when I got the second place call, I was friggin' tiny. He got it again, man. He actually, I call him tiny because he's as big as you, Frag Daddy. He's a big old guy, and so I just call him tiny. He's a real good friend of mine, and
Nice.
he he didn't get a call at all. And he come over and I said, "Hey man, I thought you had it won for sure." And he's like, "No man, I didn't get a call at all." And I'm like, "Damn, I can't believe that." He's a phenomenal steak cook. He's really good. And so we got it, and super happy. And even more cool, the cool thing about it was my Wow rub and my OG rub, which is my salt, pepper, garlic, is what I used on it. I didn't use any other rubs, just those two, and another little trick. Um, and so when I won and used my own two rubs, which I created Wow specifically as a steak and fajita grilling rub,
Yeah.
that was like really was something good. And it's already won a couple of fajita cook-offs and a couple of steak cook-offs. So I know it already had a track record, but to win one using my rubs at that event was just huge for me.
Yeah.
Really, really huge. And
But
we came home and we had a bunch of orders to fill. I was hoping I'd get to go to Austin and see my kids, for Sunday morning. I told my wife, we can't go. I'm looking at my phone. I said, we got tons of orders. We need to go back home. So we came home, started packing orders Sunday night.
But you know what, Arnie? That just means that simple's better.
Very true. Very true. And I'll share this with everybody who's watching. I normally will jacquard my steaks, but those white goos were so marbled and so pretty. I said, they don't need it, man, because they were good. I could tell they were. I had cooked two primes prior to the turn-ins, and they were just phenomenal too. Everybody there was like, "Oh, that's amazing." So I said, "All right, I'm gonna do the exact same thing on the turn-ins." The trick there was on the steaks. The test run, we did 3 test runs. The first one, I was pulling them at 140 degrees, which normally I like about 135, 137. And when I cut them, they still were, too bloody. They were still too rare. I was like, man, this thing's out. But it was the cold air and the wind, and it was getting hot outside and even inside, but it wasn't quite cooked enough yet inside.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took it to a little higher second time, and I actually pulled those, which is like really normally not normal for a steak. I pulled them like 148 and 150.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I was like, oh well, I'm just going by what I just did the last 2 little runs I did, and I'm hoping that I didn't overcook them too much.
Yeah.
And, apparently they were spot on because we got that.
I've got a Wagyu tomahawk. I'm not to get your rubs to cook with.
Man, you'll love them. I promise you, man. They're good stuff. Really good.
Or how about I just bring that Wagyu tomahawk down and we'll cook it together?
We can do that too, man. Come on. Yeah.
Well, you got to wait till I get to Texas, so
No,
There you go.
I can
Andrew.
film it for you guys.
No, that'll give us an excuse to do it again.
That's right.
Well, there you go.
I mean, hey, you know,
Did
Andrew,
Jordan and Camp House have a question?
that was oh yeah,
You asked about the restaurant?
no, that was 805 barbecue, but Eric's question was it was something to do with your camera equipment.
Oh yeah. He was basically saying that you were saying on the forums you're like into camera equipment, and so
He said ask Arnie what his new hobby with his camera lately he's getting good at.
So he's basically saying like your YouTube videos are like really good quality. What do you have a preference in cameras that you use?
I mean, honestly, you can make pretty good videos with today's iPhones, but and a lot of people are very successful with their iPhones on YouTube and on social media. But if you have the editing skills and the ability to do it, you can't match a good $high camera.
Yeah.
We started with Canon 6D Mark IIs, and I have a little M50 that I love. I still use that sometimes. So I had two Canon 6D Mark IIs, which is your entry level DSLR, full frame camera.
Yeah.
And then I upgraded and I bought an R6, last year, and it was really it's a mirrorless, the new whatever. And I'm not techie, like I said earlier, in any way, shape, or form. So it's been a challenge to learn how to use them. But the one thing they'll tell you in the photography video world is, even if you have an average camera, you have to buy good lenses. If you have good lenses and a decent camera, you can do some pretty good magic. And the 6D Mark II was a decent camera, but the lenses, I bought good quality lenses, which are not cheap. They cost more than the cameras.
Yeah.
And that really makes all the difference right there is the lenses. And now when you have good lenses and a good camera like the R6, I have 3 of those now. That makes a big difference. And the other thing they'll teach you in photography and video is lighting. Everything's about lighting. That's why I was putting my little lights a while ago, because it does make a difference in how it looks, when you're recording. And then the other trick is editing. Now there's so much editing magic out there that you can do so much with colors and grading and matching stuff. And you can take a crooked building and make it straight. They can do a lot of magic back there. But it still starts with good quality recording. And so I have 3 R6s now. I take really good care of them,
Nice.
And we really just use them for that. I've kind of picked up photography like a little hobby. I love to take pictures of birds in the backyard. And whenever we have family get-togethers, I take my cameras. I took it Wednesday when we did that live fire cook for my friends at the meat market. I took it to the Driftwood when we did that live fire cook with Alfregoni and Blanco River Meat Company, Arturo and Big Hav. I mean, those guys, super cool dudes, man. That's another thing that just, man, I'm falling in love all over again with the live fire cooking. But yeah, I took my camera there, took some really amazing pictures. And sometimes I look at them side by side with the phone pictures, and I'm like, why am I carrying this camera around? Those phone pictures are pretty amazing too. But you can only take, if you're going to edit or do something with that picture off the phone, you can only do so much.
Yeah.
You can do a lot more with the pixels and the quality, the sensor size of the camera.
Yeah.
So I'm rambling again. I'm sorry. But
Eric,
yeah, if you get a good camera and good glass, you can put out some pretty amazing content.
Eric
really,
said,
a good phone, if you get these iPhone 13s, they're pretty phenomenal too right now.
That's insane.
Eric was saying that if he can catch birds mid-flight, barbecue is a piece of cake.
If he could catch birds mid-flight, what?
I think he's talking about.
I guess he might have took some pictures, or
maybe hunting. If you can go.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah.
So in like, let's just say like backyard or when you do competitions, what's your favorite thing to cook that you would say that you like you mastered it? What do you say is like your hardest to get calls on in the comp world.
I'll be real honest with you guys. I think ribs have gotten really tough for a lot of us. And then there's a couple of guys like Fred that just seem to have figured out a good rib recipe that all the judges like to hear. But I've struggled with ribs the last few cook-offs. Briskets, pretty easy for me to do. Chicken has been pretty consistent for a long time. Excuse me, for the most part. But ribs have been a challenge. And I don't think so much that, and I look at ribs like chili and beans. You have 20 bean cups, 20 chili cups on the table. 18 of those are going to be really fantastic, and ribs are kind of like that. You turn in, if there's 20 ribs on the table, pretty much most of them are going to be pretty damn good.
Yeah.
So unless you have something that really makes it a little better than the average or pops in the judge's mouth or impresses them enough to get a better score, you can get knocked out pretty quick, even if you have a pretty dang good rib. And I'll just give you all the example. Like this last weekend in San Antonio, last year I got a second place rib there with a little more teams than we had this year, and I ran the exact same rib, and I thought it was pretty dang good. I knew it was a little off from last year's, not quite as good, but it was a really good rib.
Nice.
And it wound up, I think, 101 or something like that. No, it was 48, and then it got bumped to 52 with that shuffle they did in the IBC scoring. And my brisket, which has consistently been third, fourth, and fifth for years, wound up 99th. I was like, what? 99? It was freaking good, man. It really was. I mean, that's probably the best brisket I've cooked in a year with a cook-off. And my wife and I were both like, okay, you finally remembered how to cook a really good competition brisket, right? It turned out perfect, phenomenal, moist, tender, everything. And so I honestly expected to hit a top 10 on brisket.
Is it just that the judges change? Because you just said like, oh, you never know. So one year it's like you have,
yes.
So how do you? I mean, when you're going to these comps, in a sense, are you making what you would say this is the best brisket I know how to make, or because it's like how do you keep it consistent? Saying okay, next year I'm going to improve, but then you have all new taste testers like, oh, I would have liked last year's better. How do you?
I think it's and this is kind of what I try to teach people in our courses is it's really more about middle of the road, just good, well balanced barbecue, and we all tend to, and I've done it as much as anybody. We tend to overthink it and over flavor our barbecue for competition, and what I try to encourage people to do, and even I forget to tell myself to do it, is cook something that they like. And I tell people that I preach the 6, 7, 8 strategy. The judges in the old scoring system, and things have changed a little bit now, but generally they used to give 6 between 1 and 10, 10 being like a really great barbecue and 1 being like you suck, and so my strategy in the past was always like, if I can get 6, 7, and 8 from every judge on the table, I don't care if I don't have 9s and 10s, but if I get 6, 7, and 8 from everybody and no 5s or less, my cumulative score at the end of the table is going to be more than the guy that got 110 and 3 3s and 1 5.
Interesting. Okay.
So I always tried to cook barbecue that everybody liked. It maybe didn't blow their socks off, but it didn't get a bad score. It would be a 7 or an 8. And once in a while, they'd be 9s and 10s. I just figured that's a bonus, And so that was kind of my strategy for a long time. And there are, flavor profiles. They change all the time. It used to be like every year you need to kind of tweak your recipes a little bit. Now you almost got to tweak them every month, or every couple of months, because everywhere you go now, things have changed. Everything is sweeter now. We used to not glaze briskets, much less put sauce on the slices. Now, from what I'm seeing, if you're not putting barbecue sauce even in between slices, you're not going to get a call. And I didn't do that. Maybe I should have done that in San Antonio.
I mean, like Camp House even said, cook to the region as well.
And there is some regional preferences and profiles. Yes.
Like say if say if someone was going to come down to the valley, Edinburgh, or come out here to Carrizo, or even where Eric's at.
Yeah.
Predominantly, a lot of it's a mesquite. A lot of people use mesquite down there. So, I mean, would you say someone coming down to your region, would you want to stick with, like, say, mesquite, or would you want to try to keep it with a traditional Texas flair like Texas pecan, or how would you go about that?
I think it's personal preference on the wood. There is a big um, misconception about that everybody cooks with mesquite. It used to be that way 20 years ago, and today still is with the backyard guys. I mean, your typical South Texas guy with mesquite, but in competition, it's not like that. It's hickory, oak, and pecan. And many of us that have been cooking a long time have cooked with all those woods and cook side by side with them. And honestly, at the end of the day, you almost can't tell one oak from a pecan to a hickory because you're injecting the heck out of the meat. You're layering 3 or 4 different rubs. You're saucing it and glazing it. Then you're putting a finishing dust on top of that. So there's this boom, one bite flavor, explosion in your mouth of goodness that the smokiness kind of takes a back seat to all the other stuff. So honestly, if you just run a good clean fire, good clean smoke, the smoke, in my opinion, is kind of not the most important thing. Although you do need it, you need to have a good smoke barbecue flavor in there.
Yeah.
But I don't think the judges go like, "Ooh, that's pecan, man. I really love pecan," or "This is hickory." They don't know. They don't cook every day like we do, or every week. They're just regular folks off the street, at least here in Texas.
Yeah.
So I don't think so. And when you go to even having said what I said, I still, when I go to Central Texas, try to use more oak. When I go toward the Houston area, I try to run a little more pecan and hickory because those are flavors that are from that region.
Right.
Even though I know probably the judge ain't going to know the difference, if there's 1 out of 5 judges that does, that's going to work in your favor. And when I cook here in South Texas, I do throw a little bit of mesquite in there because, there may be that 1 or 2 judge that does like the mesquite flavor. I call that the familiar flavor. So we want to give them something familiar with.
I remember it's kind of, sorry, Jared, really quick. It is pretty funny when you're talking about the glazing, the light dusting, the injection, all that stuff. I remember, when I'm, doing these YouTube videos here and doing all these crazy experiments to brisket. And I remember meeting Jared for the first time a few weeks ago when I flew out to San Antonio. I was like, let's go I've never had Texas barbecue. Let's go to a joint. And I just remember eating this brisket. I think the restaurant was called 2M Smokehouse.
Oh, yeah.
And so I remember just having this brisket and be like, oh my gosh, this is just phenomenal. And so we met the pit master, and then he realized, oh, you guys are from YouTube and stuff like that. He's like, come on, I'll show you my 1,000-gallon pit where I smoke all this stuff. So friendly. And he was basically saying, here's the trade secret: salt, pepper, post oak. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. Here I am doing these crazy injections, saucing, dusting, just to be like, how crazy can I get this to taste? And it's like, when you took all that away and just said salt, pepper, post oak, and let it rest and just let the smoker and wood do its thing, and just
it's true.
Like, this is phenomenal. And it's so funny on how much we've using these complicated rubs, complicated injections, complicated sauces and tricks where it's like, I don't know. To me, it was so refreshing to taste, authentic Texas barbecue and just be like, this is so, I've never even done it that simple. And I was like, all right, next time I do a brisket, salt, pepper, and oak.
I mean, that's what I've been trying to tell you this whole time, Andrew, since I met you. It's like, salt and pepper, bro. That's all you need. And then
you can cook an amazing brisket with salt and pepper. Yes, you can. And I've done it too. And people ask me, for backyard, like, what should I inject you with? What did I do? What rub? I'm like, look, dude, you don't need nothing. I don't do nothing for my backyard briskets. When I cook for us at home, it's my brisket rub. I do have a more complex than salt and pepper brisket rub. But if I use salt and pepper, I'm just as happy, and it really is just time, temperature, good smoke. Wrap it in butcher paper. I don't use butcher paper in cook-offs, but I do at home. and it just turns out phenomenal, man. Just that's what we call eating brisket. You know,
Yeah.
cookout brisket is not eating brisket. It's like, okay, I gotta have a brisket away, and my neighbors love me. You know, or I give it to my family and they love it. You know, but it's so rich. You know, for us that do it all the time, we don't need it. It's not bad food. There's nothing there that's gonna hurt you, but it's just it's not the authentic. Oh, brisket is like, oh man, that's so good. It's not like that. Not to me anyway. Not to
No, I hear you.
competition guys. You know, it's that experience you just talked about. That's what we look for in the backyard too. You know, at my, you know, and in our friends' backyard and stuff like that.
So me like getting into barbecue, and my wife she'll tell you this, like if we ever get to hang out, the very first time that I ever cooked a brisket for her, Arnie, I was cooking all day, freaking it was on my week off, sitting there and I got my brisket on the smoker, I've got a case of beer, I'm drinking beer, I'm like, I went like salt, pepper, garlic, chili powder. I did this, I did that, and I'm cooking it, and it to me, I thought it got to the temperature it needed, and we both took one bite of it, and we looked at each other, and we're like, "This is the worst brisket that I've ever done." And I picked up that whole brisket, I chunked it in the trash, and I said, "Let's go eat somewhere." Like literally, that was the worst brisket I've ever done.
Wow.
And it's like my biggest inspiration, and it's like people are just gonna say it's like so cliche, but I've learned so much from watching Aaron Franklin on his classes.
Yeah.
And it's like I'll cook for Melissa's family, or I'll cook for some friends, and it's the same thing that you were saying, that like, oh, you need to open up a food truck, you need to do this, you need to do that, and it's like I've even got to the point where I've even catered a few things for some people.
Yeah.
And it's like my buddy, he's retired Marine, and I catered his graduation, and that was like the best thing that he ever had. And it's like he tells everybody, but it's like I keep it so simple, and it's like people think it's great, but then I try it, and it's like I'm so hard on myself, and I'm like,
yeah, we're all like that.
I'm like, I could do better. Like this isn't my best one, and so I'm just like, okay. It's like I get all mopey and pissy with myself. I'm like, that's it. I'm done. I'm not even gonna eat because I'm just so irritated, And I just keep pursuing to try to do better, and I splurged, and I bought a while back ago in 2015. I bought a custom pit from Gator Pit out of Houston, and I tell you what, that thing. Once I learned how to use it, that thing. Of course you can cook it on anything, but it's like having good quality pits with thick steel that holds your heat.
Yeah,
it's like you realize the difference in cooking when you actually have quality equipment.
And there's a lot of other great looking pits out there that don't cook that great. I won't say no names, but I've cooked on a gator pit at a class I did in that somebody hosted in Houston, and we used his gator.
Yeah.
And I want to say that's one of the best running pits I ever cooked on, man. It was smooth, it was clean, and it was efficient. Very efficient for a stick burner compared to the ones that I've had and the ones that I've owned in the past.
Yeah, about every 45 minutes to an hour.
I was going to say it was about 45 minutes, and I'm used to 20 to 25 minutes. And I was like, oh, it doesn't need one. You close the door and go back to class,
Right, and it's like
really good cookers, man.
Like once I figured out the true secret of my pit, like there used to be a grate that he put in there, and I took that grate out, and I throw all the wood just strictly on bare metal, and I build up my coal bed, and it's like once that pit gets up to temperature, man, it's just running like a Cadillac.
There you go.
every 45 minutes to an hour, boom, throwing a chunk of wood in there.
Yeah.
Set another piece of wood up on top of the firebox.
Yep.
Let that wood start heating up. So when you put it in, it ignites a lot sooner.
Yes.
So I've learned little stuff here and there, but
Right. Yeah, those are great cookers for sure. I didn't realize I could see the comments. I just clicked on that. So, guys and gals, I wasn't ignoring anybody. I didn't know I could read the comments until just a minute ago. Yeah. So, yeah, it's like D-Dub said. Yeah, it's not the arrow, it's the Indian. That's true. But yeah, man, I mean, good barbecue. You can cook it on anything. I mean, like I said earlier, I had that little box. We want a bunch of and then I started cooking on 2 hasty bakes back in I think 2016, 17, and honestly, we didn't win as much as I did with a stick burner. My brisket did take a plunge in consistency. We still did get some first place calls and top 10 calls that year, but when it comes to brisket, honestly, whether it's backyard or comp, I honestly don't think anything can match a stick burner for overall amazing brisket flavor. You can cook some damn good brisket. Don't get me wrong on anything. I have in my class. I have a Weber video, where we cook brisket on a. I teach you how to cook the brisket on a Weber, and it's pretty damn good. But I didn't have a stick burner for a couple years because I was running on those hasty bakes and when I got this Lone Star grill and threw a brisket in there a couple months later, I was like,
Can you
"Shit, I forgot what I was."
Can you bring the dog in, please?
Really, really, there's a difference. There really is. And I don't use it as much as I'd like to sometimes, just because cooking on a stick burner is especially a commitment of time. If you're going to do brisket, I mean, it's a 8, 10, 12 hour event, no matter what. To do it right, to have a good one, right? And I'm probably one of the first guys that started preaching hot and fast, and I'm still a hot and fast cook in competitions. But when I cook at home, I like to take my time a little bit more. I like a 10, 12 hour brisket all day long. It does. A non-injected traditional brisket does turn out better at a little lower temperature. 250, 275 is where I like to run mine, somewhere around there. I'll cook it at 3 if I'm in a hurry and I need to, but I really prefer 250, 275 on my cooker anyway.
And that's kind of what like with my gator pit. Like I've got my tuning plate set to where I can have my vent door wide open, my smokestack wide open.
Yeah.
And that thing just Cadillacs 250, 275. And it's just, I mean, like once you learn your pit, once you learn your hot spots, once you learn this and that, like it really becomes like just second nature. And I mean, that's what a lot of people don't seem to realize is, these pit masters like Aaron Franklin or Louis Mueller, all these guys, it's like they've spent how many years and how many days figuring out, like, okay, I know if I need to cook a brisket a little bit faster, if it's not as up to par to where it needs to be, I'm going to move it over to this spot. And, if things are cooking too hot, I can move my briskets over to this side.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it really is a true art. So
yeah, it is. It really is. And it takes patience and it takes trial and error. And like I said earlier, every brisket's different. It's not just like, okay, put it on at 10 and it'll be out at 9, 10 hours later or 11, or it's not like that. Some get done earlier and some don't. So it just depends. And like you said earlier, depending on where you put it on the pit sometimes too. I figured out the hard way on this gator and this Lone Star that when I'm on the bottom grate, even though my gauge says 275, 300 degrees, and it's actually in between the two grades, so it's right around there.
Yeah.
It's a 14, 15-hour brisket, no ifs, ands, or buts. I put it on the top grade, same temperature. It's a 10-hour brisket, maybe 9.
Yeah.
And so where you put it on your pit and how your pit flows makes a difference as well.
Have you cooked on any Lone Stars?
Yeah, I have a Lone Star stick.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what I have
Gotcha.
now. Little 24 by 48.
That's what my gator is a 24 by 48.
Yeah, and this one had some little kinks. I had to do some work in it to get it to run the way I like my pits to run. I know a lot of people love them and the way they come from the factory and whatever. I did not like mine at all. It's just I have, I guess, a different cooking style or the way that I like my pit to run. And when people tell me I'm crazy, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna put it to you this way. I'm a comp guy, and so with a comp, it's all about timing. Boom, boom, boom. Get it done now, and don't make mistakes and whatever. So I equate the way I like my pit to run to a NASCAR compared to the Chevy off the showroom floor. That Chevy's perfect. It's amazing. It's wonderful. It'll get you to work and take you around the world, but it isn't going to go win a NASCAR race.
Yeah.
So I like my pit to run a certain way and maintain temperature a certain way, and I like my temperatures even across the grade as much as possible. And generally, when I've tuned my pits, tweaking them in the past, they're going to be 5 to 8 degrees, no more than 10 degrees different from the firebox to the other end. And this one is pretty much right there now.
Right.
It still needs a little more tweaking, but it's close enough that I can go run with it and not worry about it.
I know each pit's different, but like for when I got to take my tuning plates out and clean my pit, I took little dowels and I cut them out. That way, when I know to when I go to put my plates back in,
Yeah,
I'll put like this little thin piece of metal, and each one gets bigger and bigger, and that's how I set my dials, so I know.
There you go.
It makes it easy.
Yeah. Hey, whatever works for you, man. Everybody has their own little thing, about how they like their equipment to run, and so do whatever works for you. Absolutely, yes, for sure.
Right on. Well, hey Arnie, I want to personally thank you for hopping on our live and chatting with our live stream guests. I actually, to date, I don't think I've ever seen more people in our live stream than when you hopped on. So we might have to.
Really?
We might have to keep bringing you back. I guess you brought all the cool kids out.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of a shy guy, so I don't know if I'll do it again.
This is your one only, so I guess we'll have to leave it up so people can keep rewatching.
Wait, so what's your famous line there, Arnie?
Make it work.
Make it work.
Yeah. That was my line, in the competition, and I give my wife credit for making that line. And I know it's a common word saying that everybody uses for different things. If you go hashtag it, there's millions of them, right?
Yeah.
But for us, my wife actually used to tell me that, we're at a competition and something didn't turn out right, or I was just mad because, like you say, we're our worst critics and I didn't like what I turned in. Or I was having an issue and she would tell me, well, you're here, you already spent the money, so make it work. Nice. And so she told me that enough times that it just stuck. Like, okay, this is the thing, we're here, you have to make it work. And so when I started teaching classes, I'd tell people, look, because a lot of times to me, a brisket, a chicken, a rib, they're like, I'm gonna throw it in the trash. It's no good. I don't like it. It's not gonna be good enough. And I'm like, no, turn it in, because you never know. And we that cook comps have seen crappy briskets win, tough ribs win, ugly chickens win. We've seen it all. So at the end of the day, just turn it in, make it work, sauce it, glaze it, put butter in it or whatever, but turn the sucker in, because you just never know what the judges are gonna like. You just really don't.
That's funny. That's awesome. Well, very cool. So the people that are watching right now, I will put in the description of this video links to all Arnie Tex stuff, so you can check out his website and his and you can check out his rubs and his classes. So I just want to thank you again, Arnie Tex. This was fun. Normally we go online, we go live for like 45 minutes to an hour. This one, it felt like we just hopped on and it's like it's already
it goes too fast.
Yeah, it was insane. I'm like,
myself, because they're so long. Usually they're long, and I'm like, I don't have time to watch that. I think it's so long.
Yeah.
But when I'm doing it, like right now, it's like, man, you're right. It looks like we just started a little while ago.
Yeah.
I was looking for another beer, and then I'm looking at the clock, and I'm like, shit, it's too late to get another beer.
That's so funny.
But anyway, I appreciate you guys having me on, man. It's a lot of fun doing stuff like this, and it's an honor really to get out here and share stuff with people. I mean, that's really what we do. Try to help other people cook better.
Oh yeah.
Awesome, man. Awesome. All right, man. Well, hey, I'm going to close it out. But Jared, thank you for being a awesome co-host and helping answer all the questions. And Arnie, I can't wait when I actually move to Texas. We'll do a rendezvous. So whenever you come up to see your kids up in Austin, swing by San Antonio, and we can.
We'll have to take you down there, Andrew.
That's right.
Where he's at.
Yeah, you need to come down here. It's a whole different culture and eating experience than even Austin and all those. There's a lot of great stuff up there, a lot of culture, whatever. But this is a different type of food down here. This is real Tex-Mex. You know, my kids grew up here, and I'm sorry to drag this on more, but I told you I'm kind of shy. But my kids grew up here with us, and they're in San Antonio, which is a very, very big Hispanic culture town. There's no good Mexican food up there. There's very, very few really good Tex-Mex restaurants. Most of it's commercial, you know, just like all these other big franchise stuff.
Yeah.
And then that's cool. I get it. You know, it's about consistency, having been in the business, trying to make everything the same and dealing with cooks and employees. I get it. But, man, you want some really, really good Mexican or Tex-Mex food, you need to come down here. It's worth the extra drive.
Awesome, man.
And then we'll cook barbecue in the evening and throw back a couple of cold ones.
There you go.
Road trip.
Throw some. All right, guys. Hey, thank you for tuning in, and we will catch you next Friday night. All right, guys? Peace.
All right, thanks.
And now, folks, it's time to say goodnight. We sincerely appreciate your patronage and hope we've succeeded in bringing you an enjoyable evening of entertainment. Please drive home carefully and come back again soon. Good night.